ya.
Do you hear me? Make it happen. In the spotlight, feeling alright. Telling stories, a world of ideas. Get that money shot. This one is way hot. Cutting deals, make the scene, make believe culture. We make it all so good. Capture this, cut it out in the magic hour. It looks so good on screen. What a groovy scene. Hey, 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 you're a movie star. You make it happen, make it happen. Hey, 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 you cross over. You make it all come alive, all come alive. Yeah, yeah. Hey, 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 you're a movie star. You got the fire, it's getting higher. Hey, 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 you cross over. You make it better, better. Yeah, yeah.
From now on, we'll all stick together.
The Canadian Media Production Association represents the nation's top producers of professional content for all screens, big and small. CMPA members make it happen. So does CMPA. To learn more about the benefits of membership, go to cmpa.ca.
And now, to open PrimeTime in Ottawa 2013, please welcome the host of the conference, President and CEO of the Canadian Media Production Association, Michael Hennessy.
God, I haven't heard a disembodied voice of God like that since the 70s. We're on a really tight schedule today, and I promised Mark Sagan, Mark and Lisa Morrow are the people that make this thing happen on time and on schedule, that I wouldn't go off script. So if you'd allow me a minute to go off script. Mark is, Mark's like this guy that just does everything exactly on time. And he not only is able to manage to make prime time happen at time, and it'll get back on time by the time the break's over, but he has total control over his home life too. In fact, his wife, Natalia, has promised, and this is a fact, this is true, she has promised that their first child won't show up until Saturday morning after prime time. Mark, that is brilliant. So, okay, good morning, everybody. I'm delighted to welcome you to the 23rd annual PrimeTime in Ottawa conference. It's hard to believe I've only been part of the CMPA team, it is the CMPA team, since last June. So much has happened since then. Of course, my life is now in order after TELUS. I was asked to come in last June as a change agent. And I discovered, that's the easiest job you have in the world. Every day I get up, I look out of my window and everything changes, mission accomplished. So seriously though, change is now the new status quo. In fact, just this week, the CRTC, to keep things really topical at prime time, not only announced BC Astral Phase 2, but as part of the fallout of that, we're also confronted now with a pending sea change in children's programming and animation in this country. At CMPA, our job is, of course, to help our members navigate this change. And these days, that's a bit like racing an avalanche down a ski hill. So, global market demand for video seems almost insatiable, and that should be great news. Unfortunately, in a digital market, the linkages between insatiable demand and revenue are often as unrelated as they can be broken. And this is creating huge uncertainty, including, as recently reported in the media, tensions between broadcasters and producers when it comes to terms of trade. I just want to say, no big deal. It's only about money. Everybody's a little tense these days. So 2 weeks ago, talking about only about money, an analyst commenting in The Economist on the huge pressures in the film industry stated this. He said, quote, "People are still watching the same amount of movies they did a few years ago. They're just spending $6 billion a year less doing it." And that's the nub of the problem. That's what tension's all about. Insatiable demand may be the fresh snow, but digital is the avalanche. Because in a world of global competition and the disintermediation of suppliers through digital platforms, revenues can drop like a stone. Now, even as consumption rises. Now, MPAA head Senator Chris Dodd, our luncheon speaker today, probably has a few thoughts for the film industry on how to manage this change. But I think, the solution for all of us, no matter what part of the content business we're in, is to follow the money and grow the pie beyond traditional markets. But how? The formula, I think, is very easy, and that's to deliver to the audience what they want, on the platform they want, and when they want it. But the execution, the sharing, not so easy. Because broken as it may be, the status quo remains the only familiar train we know. But the status quo is the avalanche. Luckily, our keynote speaker this morning, Robert Tercek, can share his views on how to realign digital strategies in a world of disintermediation. Now, there's still lots of good news, and in 2012, there was a lot to celebrate in terms of value creation. The latest numbers from Profile show that the industry generated $5.9 billion in production volume last year. And that created 132,500 full-time jobs, not counting spin-offs, and almost $2.2 billion in export value. To me, that's proof positive that we become an engine that's going to help drive the digital economy. And more good news, domestic TV production showed an over 20% increase in production expenditure as Canadian shows proved over and over again they can punch above their weight. This fall, 8 out of 10 of the most popular Canadian drama series were produced by CMPA members, and many shows like Flashpoint, Murdoch Mysteries, Saving Hope, Arctic Air, Bomb Girls, Rookie Blue, Republic of Doyle, and Mr. D and The Listener have become audience staples. And now new hits like Cracked and Motive keep adding to the inventory. That's because you, as producers, are doing such a good job, but it's also because our partners in the broadcast industry are helping make this happen. Can't do anything without collaboration. Canadian children's and youth programming performs strongly, with shows like Splat-A-Lot, Mr. Young, Johnny Test, and Joan Black, not only selling worldwide, but they're scoring really well on US networks. Lifestyle, too, has broad international audience appeal, with winners like Property Brothers, Top Chefs, Income Property, Eat Street, Ice Pilot, Love It or List It or Design DNA. But at the very time we're seeing that success, pressures on broadcast revenues are leading to risk aversion and investment not in successful Canadian brands, but shifting investment over to brands that are trusted, like Big Brother Canada and Amazing Race Canada. Now, those are great shows, and the audience, the audience is showing that, and you can't mess with the audience. But it's troubling. It's a troubling thing when you start wondering about what's going to happen to homegrown shows and producers that are already proving they can be successful in markets like the US. So to me, what's really important is that, Canada now, I think, coming from MIPCOM last year and looking around, Canada's the new cool in the creative market. And it's not just, shows made for the American market, for instance. It's shows that are considered programs of national importance in Canada. Last year, 85 shows that were funded by the Canadian Media Fund gained international distribution, and that included 31 sales right into the US market. To me, that is tremendous audience validation for the quality of our collective works. And, quality and recognition extends to film as well. Take the Oscar nominee Rebelle or War Witch. It took 10 awards at the Canadian Screen Awards. We don't know the name of the awards yet, but it did. It was awesome. And that's just one film. Think about Take This Waltz, Monsieur Lazare, A Dangerous Method, and Screen Award winners Midnight's Children and Blackbird. But, don't run out to the theater to see these films because you may get lost looking for them. And that's really sad because in 2010-11, Canadian films won a total of 133 awards at festival, including 61 at the international level. The problem is that this news sometimes is a secret in Canada, in part because we don't promote our success well enough. And without marketing and promotion and distribution, you simply can't reach an audience no matter how good the product. And anybody that saw Wardwich knows that that's a good product. But that's why promotion will be another big topic at PrimeTime, and it's a priority for the CMPA. But it's also a priority for Telefilm and the CMF and CRTC, and they're all sponsoring work in this area. So good for them. You know, compounding film's problems really are shifting demographics. You know, Canadians are increasingly spending more time in the theater at home than they are at the theater down the street. And this is happening at a time when broadcasters are pulling back in terms of financing and exhibiting feature films in favor of dramatic series, which provide longer promotional cycles and involve less risk. And that's good programming, don't get me wrong. You know, I understand the risk aversion. It makes total sense. But on top of that, for the film guys, we've got the DVD market, which was a principal source of revenue, and that's all but collapsed due to a shift in on-demand services and the persistent issue of piracy. So to me, you know, the reason I think that this revenue implosion really sucks is because research shows that people still love to watch movies. So, but too bad. I think here's the formula. If the audience won't go to the theater, our products better readily be available to the audience on the screen they watch at home and the screen they increasingly carry on the go. That's got to be the new mantra. But that requires a new TV, streaming, and on-demand strategy that increases not just the monetization and financing, but also the promotion, exhibition of Canadian features. So hang around, because film's going to be a really big topic this year at PrimeTime. And by the way, it's going to be a really big topic at the CRTC hearings next month. So while we've seen a significant growth in domestic production, we're also seeing the beginning of a big downturn in the service industry last year. And this is particularly true in Quebec and Nova Scotia, and as we've closely followed the news in British Columbia. So this should be a really troubling thing for proponents of a digital economy for Canada. And it's troubling because the investment and jobs associated with our position as Hollywood North create that very infrastructure, scale, and talent that is fundamental and required to support the creation of Canadian intellectual property across the country. And ultimately, it's that intellectual property that creates value and is going to drive the digital economy. And to think this is merely a regional issue as reported is flat out wrong. It's a global battle. Increasingly, governments realize that economic growth and high-value jobs are going to be driven by the digital economy. And the countries or jurisdictions that get there first may build lasting economic advantage. So one of our priorities is to promote the economic value of our industry in terms of its contributions through innovation and investment to job creation and exports. Why? Because to remain competitive, we need to ensure that our financing incentives are modern and efficient and competitive. However, in times like this, to justify any change in policy, you first have to demonstrate value. It's not entitlement. And that begins by demonstrating that we have already created economic value out of intellectual property. Intellectual property, after all, is the most valuable currency there is in an information economy. But, you know, economic arguments alone are not going to be sufficient. We also need public support, and that begins by creating buzz about the content we create. And that's why I was so pleased last weekend at the success of the Canadian Screen Awards. Thank you very much, Helga Stevenson, because those combined awards attracted a broader audience and took celebrating content to a new level. Our public affairs teams now have a mandate to tell the economic story in Ottawa and in the provinces on your behalf. But you know, to create buzz, they need your support, because it's the creative talent and the content that you develop that are the stars of the digital economy. Our shows and our stars have got to be our best ambassadors. So, look, I submit collectively that we've done a really mediocre job in selling the audience and influencers on just how good and increasingly popular our content is. That we've actually had so much recent success with so little marketing at times is clearly remarkable. But just imagine what we could accomplish with more promotion. Later today, we're going to hear from the CMF and Telefilm, along with a panel of experts, on how to better promote the success and increase access and discoverability to Canadian content. Now, we all know that navigating change can be a nightmare. You know, I wake up some nights struggling to sort out all these challenges, and I've discovered that it helps to try to put the end game into simple perspective. We have a new business models committee going at CMPA this year, making that end game a priority. And while it's not easy to define our future, we know this: it has to be built on a growth strategy that begins with serving the audience on their terms and on their turf. So why the focus on growth? Because the Achilles heel for Canadian success in production has always been a lack of scale. Because growth floats all boats, and growth is about defining a new future, not fighting over the status quo. The status quo is already the past. The status quo is dead. So while we may be hitting the saturation point in traditional Canadian markets like linear TV, there's still lots of room for growth. The market for content is clearly exploding. Maybe the boxes are changing, but the demand is there. And the demand for storytelling through multiple platforms is only going up. And this is as true in terms of international sales and distribution as it is for new production opportunities in the digital and branded entertainment markets. And what does growth mean? Growth means more pie, and more pie means less tension. And, you know, less tension comes from more collaboration, and we know that collaboration works. We've seen it on the screen. Domestic success of our products comes from collaboration between all our partners, particularly broadcasters. And our success at home is evidence of that. And the partnerships are already working on international markets on these principles. Just consider the success of international co-productions like the Tudors and the Borgias and Coppers, to name just a couple. So, in terms of collaboration, rather than fighting over that dead pie, not your dead pie, but you know, it's a dead pie. Maybe domestically, I went off script. Maybe domestically we could discuss how to replace some of the value that's being lost in the conventional TV space by talking about how can we partner to create more value in the interactive realm, starting by leveraging audience engagement, because that's what it's all about. Or what about if we started talking about working with the sales teams of broadcast companies in the lifestyle space to actually work at leveraging and expanding the verticals in the branded entertainment market? Talk to Kit Redmond on her panel today, because she's got some brilliant evidence of success in that area. And talking about collaboration, we're welcoming our delegation from Australia. They're looking for co-production opportunities, and Matthew Diener, the head of the Australian Association, and I have been talking about some things that maybe Matthew will be able to announce a bit about at the luncheon tomorrow, along with our friends from the UK, Will Evans from the British Film Institute. So collaboration and sharing are and always will be the fundamental elements of our production business. But here's something critical you have to understand about independent producers before we can discuss any new opportunities. We simply cannot sustain our business without the opportunity to not only control, but share in the exploitation of the intellectual property we create. And share is a critical word, but so is control. And this is not merely an observation. This is gospel to us. And it's a point that has to be understood. And it's the gains that we've already achieved in controlling and licensing our IP through terms of trade, thank you to the broadcasters for helping us do that, that we're now so passionate about protecting. Because being able to exploit and share with our partners what we create is the essence of what makes us independent. And a world of consolidation, independence is going to be the critical element in ensuring diversity goes forward. This is just a good thing to remember. And it's going to be foremost in our arguments we'll present in the growing number of regulatory proceedings we'll attend this spring. So let me try to summarize what the vision is we'll be pursuing at CMPA this year. First and foremost, we start from the premise that the audience is ultimately all that matters. And that's whether we're thinking domestically or internationally, because if intellectual property is the currency in a digital economy, you know, it's still the audience that's going to determine the value of that currency. Second, we need to better promote the value of our products and increasingly engage consumers, the audience, in the creative process through tools like social media if we're going to grow. And that'll create buzz, and that'll create promotion at the grassroots. But success still also requires more promotion through the traditional broadcast windows. Because what gets promoted and what gets exhibited on screen gets consumed on screen. Third, we need to grow our business substantially by focusing on new markets for video storytelling, like digital and branded entertainment. At the same time, we're building our successes to date by leveraging the quality of our domestic product and talent in even more countries. And fourth, we absolutely need to change the political perception of our business from that as a cultural contributor to that of an economic engine that creates innovation, that creates export opportunities, and creates high-value jobs, and most important, develops a future for our children so that they can excel on the world stage. That's all we have to do. Not an easy task, but as long as we follow a basic formula based first on audience engagement, innovation, and the control of IP through collaboration with our partners, and our partners from broadcasters to talent, to governments and investors, then I think we have a course to follow for navigating through that change. So that's all I have to say on this. But you know, just before we hear from our first real speaker, I'd like to take a couple of moments to get some housekeeping items out of the way. And these are important. So once again, PrimeTime is paperless. The conference program, sponsor and member videos, and social networking tools are available on the PrimeTime in Ottawa web. And they're available for any smartphone or tablet. Now, you've all received a login and the password upon registration. If you have any problems, please visit our help desk and charging station beside the registration desk. And if you have other concerns, please look for CMPA staff that are wearing red lanyards. I have a red lanyard, but I can't help. We invite you to enjoy our exhibitors, and particularly to visit the Quebec room, where the William F. White Delegate Lounge is a great place to meet, chat, and to see what other delegates are saying on Twitter. And with that in mind, we'd like to congratulate William F. White for 50 years in the industry. And we'd like to thank them for donating to these film industry. 50 years, Paul. Yeah. Remember the 60s? Yeah, rock and roll. So, you know, what can we do? Well, I think, you know, we have a video actually that we'd like to run just as a little tribute to Paul and the company in celebration of their anniversary. So, can we hit it?
We are the sum of our parts. We are interdependent on each other. We collaborate with each other. We seek out ideas. We seek out talent, and collectively, we come up with a really great recipe.
Legends of the Fall, Unforgiven. We did Brokeback Mountain.
White's is about big shows, White's is about small shows. White's is about filmmaking.
They're coming to White's. They are going to get the latest technology that is available.
Whatever you can get in Hollywood, you can get here.
Everybody has lights, but there's nobody in this country that can service customers as well and as far and wide as William F. White.
There's not usually a day that goes by where if I'm out and about, somebody comes up and says that their lives were touched by William F. White in some way, shape, or form.
So, you know, we talk a lot about social media. I just want you to know we have 4 Twitter screens in all throughout the conference floor. Next year we'll have 8. So please join us in the conversation. Our hashtag is displayed on all the tables, but for those of you that don't have your reading glasses on, it's hashtag PTIO, PrimeTime in Ottawa. We also welcome the Canadian Media Fund's Sabrina Moella, who's hosting a tweet seat throughout the conference. Sabrina, why don't you stand so we all know who you are? There you are. We also have a couple of short announcements. We're delighted to announce that we've just contributed $10,000 to the Actors Fund. And the BC branch of CMPA is contributing another $5,000 in funding for 2013. And we're going to issue a challenge to all delegates to match or better our donation. Now, what is the Actors Fund? The Actors Fund is a lifeline for Canada's entertainment industry. There's not a lot of safety nets in this industry for most of the players. More than 10,000 directors, actors, producers, and crew members in film and TV, theater, music, and dance have been helped by the fund so far. This fund provides emergency financial aid to cultural workers who are often without health or saving plans to recover from a catastrophic event in their lives. The Actors Fund now has an exhibit in the main hall, and I'd like you to go visit David Hope to find out a little more. David, would you mind standing up just so we can recognize you? David, in the middle. Thank you, David. Now, over the next 2 days, during our breakfast and luncheon sessions, Stephen Ellis, chair of the Canadian Retransmission Collective, will be drawing a name from the delegates list to win an Apple iPad. All delegates' names have been automatically entered. CRTC is a very cool thing for producers. It collects and distributes, in the millions, Canadian territory retransmission royalties. I know some of you don't know what that means, but it means a lot to us. On behalf of producers in Canada and around the world. And to date, this has amounted to $165 million back to the production industry. So we're also going to be issuing a random draw for iPad minis. So please leave your business card in the box by the registration office. The only catch is you have to be in the room at the time of the draw to win. And that shouldn't be hard because the program that Mark and Lisa and the rest of the gang have put together, Priya, is incredible. It's a super program. So Stephen, why don't you join me in the first draw of the day? Copyright guy. Cool. It's cool. $165 million. Copyright is cool. Stephen? Do you have the...
I think I'm missing a prop.
You're missing a prop, yes. And the winner is Michael Hennessy's wife. We should just give it to Corey Coe, because without Corey at Bell Media, we may never have got terms of trade. I don't know if a lot of people know that. So there's a shout out. Suzanne Gerard, Phil Marteau. Okay. You there, Suzanne? Well, come on up. We have, Suzanne, the one thing about this Apple iPad that makes it unique and just for you is that we've actually geo-blocked it. Congratulations.
Thank you so much. Thank you. There's two kisses.
Aren't you glad you got up for breakfast?
I'm
C'est ça.
What do I do?
Here, right there, photo op. You're now famous. This will go out on Twitter. Hashtag PTIO, PrimeTime in Ottawa.
I was looking for one. Oh my God, I have the old one. Oh.
Parfait. Thank you. Okay. How does something like PrimeTime happen? It happens with our sponsors. And so I'd like to take a moment to thank our platinum sponsors, Astrel, our platinum sponsor, Bell Media, the CMF, and our lead government sponsor, Telefilm Canada. And of course, William F. White celebrating 50 years in the industry. Good work, Paul. Another clap, another shout out for Paul. What a guy, what a guy. And now finally, Robert, I hope your plane's not going to be delayed. It's my great pleasure to welcome back to Primetime the ever-popular Robert Tercek. You know, Robert has been creating breakthrough entertainment across all platforms for the past 20 years. So he knows a thing or two about new technologies. We were saying recently there's been a lot of anxiety in the future of television. Hey, Robert's going to get up here and say, well, you know, on the one hand, the future of television is not so good. You're kind of dead. But that's okay, because the future of video is big and it's hot. So Robert, you know, without further ado, why don't you come over, take the stage, and really let us know all what's going on.
Thank you for that introduction. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, producers. I'm thrilled to be back in Ottawa for Primetime. Thank you very much for having me back again. It's an honor to be here. And it's a delight to be in Ottawa when the weather's so nice. And you're laughing, but you know, right now in Washington, D.C., they're getting hit with this colossal snowstorm. And I think it's like karmic justice, because after years of climate change denial, they finally get to experience, like they're swapping weather with Ottawa for a week, so they get to experience what you live through every single year. So I'm happy to be in your town with the beautiful weather. Happy to be back to talk to you about the future of television. One of my projects that I'm working on right now is I'm developing a show called Inventing the Future, where we interview scientists and technologists about the new breakthroughs that are going to change the future. And I just want to start by sharing a couple of those examples with you, because they're quite extraordinary. There are incredible breakthroughs happening with robotics. Robotics is leaving the factory floor, and it's starting to come to the home. It's coming to the street. We now have, legally, you can drive robotic cars in California, Nevada, and Florida. So this is coming very quickly. We have robot drones flying in the sky. That's a little bit creepy. We've even put a robot vehicle on another planet, 50 million miles away, that's driving around and taking soil samples and other readings and sending back data to the United States, back to the Earth. This is kind of extraordinary that this stuff is happening. It's not just out in space, though. Here on Earth, biology has become the new computer science. This is extraordinary. The field of synthetic biology. There are these great breakthroughs happening. Scientists are actually programming DNA the same way you would program a computer. They're writing new code, they're inserting it into life, they're actually manufacturing new forms of life, new organisms. And they're going to have great breakthroughs for medical science and actually manufacturing and all sorts of other fields. And usually when I talk about the future, there's someone in the audience who says, yeah, but where's my flying car? I'm happy to tell you that there actually is a flying car now. I know, this sounds like science fiction, but it's real. There's a flying car. The wings fold up so that you can drive it on the street. You can park it in a garage, but when you get to an airport, you can unfold the wings, and it literally flies in the sky. So there are some incredible breakthroughs happening in many different fields. But when we look at television, I have to come to the conclusion that we're doing everything we can not to embrace the future, but to fight the future, to push off the future. One analyst in the US says when he walks into his living room, he feels like he stepped back in time 20 years. And today, my comments are going to be a little bit about what's happening here in the United States, not here in Canada, but in the United States. So forgive me for giving you an American-centric viewpoint, but that's where the field I know the best. The big challenge, of course, for the past several years has been, can television make this migration over to the digital arena successfully and gracefully, or are they going to face a catastrophic collapse, the same way we saw the record industry and the print industry collapse over the past 10 years? So that's the big challenge, that's the big fear that we face. And in the background, there's a kind of titanic thing at work, which is the collision between two systems. The open participatory nature of the internet, which has caused that medium to grow faster than any medium on Earth. There are now more than 2.5 billion people using the internet. And of course, the closed system of pay television, which has proven to be the very best way to generate revenue of any media economy in the world. So those two things are in collision. And until they resolve, last year I told you that we'd be in this period of interregnum, where all sorts of paradoxical things happen, and progress doesn't seem to be made. Now, there is progress happening. There are some incredible innovations occurring in social TV, the second screen, online originals, and so on. But most of that is occurring outside of the traditional TV business. Most of the innovation is happening because of new companies, companies outside of television. The TV industry seems to be devoting an awful lot of energy towards thwarting these new developments. They're using proven techniques like content lockout. Just take, for instance, the way HBO deals with Netflix, where they vowed never to license any content to Netflix under any circumstances. Millions are spent lobbying Congress for favorable legislation. Litigation, gigantic lawsuits designed to stifle innovative companies in the crib, as it were. And of course, if all else fails, you go to Congress and you go to the FCC and you lobby for favorable treatment from the regulators. A couple of examples. So last year, when I spoke to you, I talked to you about an innovative new company called Aereo with a bold vision for a cloud-based DVR that would make it possible for people to watch any TV show anytime they want to. Within days of my talk here in Ottawa, Aereo was hit by major lawsuits, not one but two, from every major broadcaster in the United States. And make no mistake about it, the purpose of these lawsuits isn't just to prove out a point of law. That needs to happen, of course. But it's also a tactic that's designed to drive that company to extinction by squandering all of its operating capital and tying it up in litigation. And so that process continues. That court case will take some time to resolve. Another example, I warned last year that the efforts to monitor the use of copyrighted content on the internet and maybe even stop piracy might lead us to inadvertently stifling communication. What one scholar at the Cato Institute in Washington calls it, he says that we're at risk of creating an architecture of censorship. Well, since the time that I spoke to you, there have been some amazing examples of that architecture of censorship occurring. This one is from Barack Obama's website. And if you were watching the Democratic Party's convention last fall, when Michelle Obama gave her speech, this is what you saw on screen, this blank screen. And that is because that speech, which of course had been cleared by the Democratic Party for use on Barack Obama's website, was triggered a copyright robot that called for an automated takedown notice. And so the system that was playing out the video on Barack Obama's own website took down that video of his wife's speech. And so you saw this copyright notice. That's not the only time that's occurred. A couple of awkward incidents. Neil Gaiman, the writer, was honored at the Hugo Awards, the big science fiction awards, and they rolled a video clip that had been cleared for that event, honoring him. And in that video clip, there were, of course, copyrighted works that had been cleared for that usage, and the copyright robots took that video down. That was also blocked. And even that Mars Curiosity rover that I showed you just a second ago on Mars, the video from that was blocked by copyright robots, even though that content is paid for by the American citizens and it was being streamed on NASA's website. So we have a real problem here in our overzealous enforcement of copyright and our efforts to preserve an old business model at the expense of the new. And I think it presents a real challenge that we need to be aware of. You see, for too long, we've been conditioned to look at the internet as a challenge to TV, and that's a blanket categorization that I think blinds us to the possibility of partnership. I think we're starting to see now companies are working more closely with Netflix and Hulu, and they're starting to work collaboratively to figure out a transition path. But for a long time, there was opposition, and I think that's still ingrained in the minds of a lot of traditional TV people. They look at everything on the internet as the opposition. I think that's a false dichotomy. What we're seeing then is two types of innovation. You know, TV companies, they do innovate, but they're not doing the kind of disruptive innovation. They're doing what Clayton Christensen would call sustaining innovation, or what I call defensive innovation. An example of that would be these second screen apps from our cable companies like Comcast, or satellite companies like DirecTV, or cable channels like HBO. And these second screen apps, these are companion apps for television, they're not really disruptive innovation. They don't expand the business, they don't grow the business, they don't drive new revenue. All they really do is put old wine in new bottles. They put the same content on the digital tablet. It's a way to keep the audience, preserve the audience, and preserve the old business, but it's not really driving any kind of significant innovation. The result of all these efforts to fight the future, to kind of preserve the old business, is a fragmented landscape that's introduced tremendous amounts of friction. Consumers get frustrated when they go online to look for a show that they want to watch. They get frustrated because they have to look at several different websites to find the video that they're looking for. Often they'll run into a roadblock of some sort, a subscription barrier, notice that that content's not available on a particular service, or that the content won't be available until a week later or a week after it aired or something. And the problem is we have different rules for every type of content, so it's very much friction for consumers. And our TV manufacturers, they're insisting on proprietary standards to control the development of software on their new smart TVs. And so if you want to develop a service that runs across all the digital devices, you have to do what Netflix did. You have to port your software to more than 800 different devices. This is incredible friction that's slowing down the migration. And in terms of measuring and valuing the audience, well, we've made practically no progress on this front since I started talking to you 3 years ago. You see, today, you can have an audience member look at the exact same show on a television, a tablet, a computer, or a smartphone, and they're valued differently, they're measured differently on each of those platforms. Obviously, this needs to change for the benefit of the entire industry. Television was described to me once as a locked box that's exploding with cash. I love that metaphor, and if you ever wonder why so many companies are seeking to disrupt TV, well, that's the reason, right? Everyone's trying to pick that lock and get that cash. The TV industry's done such a brilliant job of defending itself against the internet. In fact, it's over-defended, I think. We're starting to see dangerous signs of inflation, of a bubble emerging, certainly in sports rights. In the last 4 years, during the worst economy of our adult lives, we've seen sports franchises increase in value by more than 50%. And these sports franchises are extracting enormous amounts of money out of the pay TV system. Those are costs that are passed directly on to the consumer. I believe there's also a bubble occurring in carriage fees or affiliate fees. You might call it the bundling bubble, whereby channels that really don't deserve to exist are profitable because they're partnered, they're part of a bundle sold en masse as a block to a cable or satellite distributor. And so that's a kind of artificial bubble. Retransmission fees, where the broadcast networks are getting paid sometimes up to $1 per viewer on a cable system or a pay TV system. I think this is also a bubble. And the reason there's such a big fight over Aereo and their cloud DVR right now, the reason that's such an intense fight is that if Aereo is successful, these retransmission fees are going to go away. But right now, broadcasters are hooked on this free money. It's pure profit. It drops straight to the bottom line. And finally, I would argue that there's an advertising bubble as well. You see, over the last 30 years, the TV audience has dropped in half. That's the yellow line. But the CPM for that audience has increased fourfold in the same period of time. That can't continue. We can't keep charging more for an ever-dwindling audience. Eventually, one of these bubbles is bound to burst. And so I think your television set should come with a warning label that says, caution, content's under extreme pressure. It could explode at any time. What might prick that bubble? Well, there's a couple of different ways it might occur. And let's take a look at that. What might cause a catastrophic collapse? One thing is that we've spent so much energy fighting off these companies that could have helped the TV business migrate faster, that we've actually created a window for pirates to come in. And this is a giant challenge that both sides of the table need to take a serious look at. Because the more we squabble with innovative internet companies that want to help television migrate, the more we're creating an opportunity for pirates to come in. It doesn't make any sense to me that pirates offer the best service available, where all the content you want to watch is available on whatever device you're interested in looking at. That seems crazy to me, and of course the price point is hard to argue with. And pirates innovate too. Check this out. This is in the UK right now. This is a certified BitTorrent box. It looks just like a Roku box or an Apple TV. It's identical to those things. It costs less than £100. You plug it in with an HDMI cable that's included when you buy that, and instantly you can download BitTorrent straight to your television set. And if you don't want your broadband provider to know what you're doing, well, guess what? They bundle a free VPN with that service. This is a pirate's dream. Folks, as an industry, we need to take this seriously and say, okay, let's stop fighting the companies that are trying to help us make the transition, embrace them and work together to thwart the real competition. You know, in this interval where we've held off the internet for so long, we've also done something else to hurt ourselves. You see, our audience is starting to find that they can easily substitute a show with an online original. So if they go around from service to service and they're frustrated because they can't find the show they want to watch, well, then they're going to settle for something else. They're not going to go back to television just because they can't find your show on the internet. They're going to go find another show. And so we've actually stimulated an appetite for online originals. And if you haven't paid attention to this, the programming is fantastic. The quality is very close to what you'll find on pay TV. So just in the past couple of years, online originals have emerged as a terrific alternative. That's a real concern for everybody in this room. There is an analyst named Laura Martin at the Needham Company who writes brilliant research about the TV business. And a few years ago, she wrote about a scenario she called World War III. And her view was that disruption wasn't going to occur because of outside forces or internet companies or even piracy. Her view was the disruption would occur inside of the cozy oligopoly between cable TV companies and the channel providers, that the squabbling between them would blow up this incredible machine that we've built, this incredible monetization machine. Well, we're starting to see evidence of that in the United States as well. I'm afraid to tell you, you probably have heard about the really acrimonious disputes that Dish Network has had in their renewal deals, their renewal discussions with channel providers. Time Warner Cable is starting to drop channels left and right. And now recently, just a week ago, Cablevision decided to sue Viacom over bundling. And they're saying that that's an antitrust violation for Viacom. I doubt that that's going to be successful. Many people have dismissed this as just a negotiation tactic, of course. But you're starting to see signs that the oligopoly, that locked box of television, is starting to break open from the inside. That should be a matter of grave concern to all of us. I'm not here to talk to you about what we're doing to protect the past. I'm not here to castigate the television industry. I am here to tell you we've got to think different. 15 years ago, Steve Jobs told us to think different. For 15 years, the TV industry has been focused on thinking the same and preserving the past. And my view is if you want to be successful in digital media, you got to stop looking in the rearview mirror and start thinking like a disruptor. You have to start adapting a new style of thought. You see, every industry has blind spots. TV is no exception. I'll give you an example. When I show you this picture, I'll ask you, what do you see when you see this? When I show this to television executives, they look and they say, well, I see 3 screens, a big screen, a small screen, and a really small screen. And then they send their distribution salespeople over and they say, license our content out to all those new screens. And they do so, and actually that has now emerged, that SVOD revenue has emerged as a decent revenue stream. So good enough. But when a disruptor looks at this picture, they see something that you don't see. What they see that you can't see is an invisible layer of software that connects all of these devices together and creates brand new opportunities for businesses, opportunities for people to download content to one device, new ways for them to browse content, to download it, to monetize it in an ecosystem that's totally separate from the pay TV ecosystem. And then they can beam that content over to the device they want to watch it on. And they have new ways to organize that content, set up playlists, new ways to manage it, and control the video on their own terms, outside of the tight control of that channel guide that comes in pay TV. And of course, they also see ways for them to use social media to talk about the shows, to promote the shows, to market the shows on your behalf. Now, this invisible layer of software is creating gigantic business opportunities, but too few television companies are taking advantage of it. They just don't see it. New media requires that we take a new attitude, that we examine our old attitudes. And I don't mean just the programming people. I don't mean just the distribution people. I mean every person in your organization has to adapt a new attitude. They have to start to look at this and say, digital is fundamentally the future of our business, and it's every person's responsibility to embrace it. You have to begin to think about concepts like real time. TV is a seasonal business. We still have a fall season, a spring season, a summer season. We move in this languid pace. But if you look at the internet, companies like Twitter have conditioned us to this intense, furious pace of innovation. We've become conditioned to real time. If you want to find out what's really happening now, breaking news, you don't look at TV. You go to Twitter to find out what's happening right in the second. It's kind of a way to tap into the collective conscious of all the people on a particular topic. Some TV programmers have begun to adapt to this. So we're seeing, for instance, a 24-hour news cycle. Now in Los Angeles, where I live, they're talking about the end of the pilot season, kind of a permanent pilot season. And we're seeing some programs integrate live chat and live feeds as well. And so there's a kind of a slow migration towards this real time. But if you're really going to embrace real-time thinking, you've got to reconsider your whole business. When television moves over to the internet, we're going to have to start to change the way we sell. And that means we have to embrace things like real-time bidding and real-time exchanges for advertising, where we can see who's watching the show and target advertising directly to them. Where we have new ways to measure the performance and engagement, new ways to track audiences across devices, new ways to engage the audience by opting in to advertising marketing campaigns. That means we have to think different about the way we package and sell. Goodbye to the upfront, goodbye to sweeps where you periodically measure your audience. We're going to move into a real-time world where people can buy the real audience that's watching now in real time. That's going to totally transform the sales process of television. Another concept that you need to embrace if you want to think disruptive is big data. Today we hear about it a lot, but I think we tend to dismiss it as just another buzzword. Let me give you 2 examples of how this is going to change television. You know, you've seen the movie, you've read the book, Moneyball. How many people have seen the movie, Moneyball? It's a great film. Great, okay, good. You know that story, right? Jonah Hill is a quantitative analysis geek. And he meets Brad Pitt, who is the general manager of a pro baseball team, and he convinces him there's a new way to evaluate baseball players, a new way to do it using data analytics. And of course, the old talent scouts, the old baseball scouts, they rebel against this because they use instinct, they use their guts to decide who the best players are going to be, and they rebel. And there's a big dramatic scene where one of the talent scouts walks out. You know, he kind of has a big dramatic showdown with Brad Pitt. But ultimately, Jonah Hill wins, and he doesn't just transform that team. They transform Major League Baseball, and ultimately, every sports franchise now uses data analytics to measure player success and to figure out who's going to start. It's not limited to baseball. In fact, quantitative analysis is starting to permeate just about every business you can think of. Some examples, the financial industry, the venture capital business. You know, people used to do trades based on a gut, investment based on a gut instinct. Now, today, it's all done with quantitative analysis. Advertising is being transformed from a purely creative business using intuition, and now it's turning into a data analytics business where they measure performance. And medicine and health is also being transformed, where instead of a doctor making a gut instinct decision about what a patient's diagnosis might be, they're now using data to measure your health as well. So perhaps you're in the audience now thinking, well, that'll never happen to TV. Well, we're going to keep programming the way we always have, using gut instinct and the creative process and so forth. I have to tell you, it's going to change. It's going to change. And it might come in the fashion of the A/B test. If you're not familiar with the A/B test, this is very commonly used on the internet. It's a very simple process. You take traffic, your audience, and you divert them into one of two paths. Version A is your control version, and version B is a new thing that you're testing out. Now, today we have very sophisticated analytic dashboards for content companies to use on the internet, and so that you can see in real time which version is testing better. In this example, version A is testing 50% better than version B. Who's using it? Well, Google is a pioneer. They use this kind of aggressively. They tend to use it for just about everything. You see, in a two-way network, you can do this constantly, get feedback from your audience about what's working and what isn't. Every online marketing company, every email marketing company, and every e-commerce company has implemented aggressive A/B testing, whereby they take up one proposition and another proposition, and they test to see which one converts into a sale at a higher rate. And they may discover that changing a background from red to blue, or changing a headline or a tagline can drive 2-3% higher conversion rates. Well, then they kill the version that's not working, and they conduct further tests on the version that did work. Now, you might think, well, how does that affect the content business? In fact, many content businesses on the internet are using A/B testing as well. Game companies have almost universally embraced metrics-driven design, where feedback from the audience governs the design of the creative content. And increasingly, content companies on the web are embracing A/B testing. If you look at the Huffington Post, for instance, the news site, you'll see, if you open two browsers on your computer, you may see that you'll see two versions of the same headline, or two versions of a photograph on a page. If you go to the exact same page, that means that you're getting both A and B in a real-time A/B test that's occurring. Now, maybe you're listening to this and you're thinking, yeah, but that'll never come to television. I have news for you. It's almost certainly coming. I've already spoken to companies in the US that are developing the technology for this. If it doesn't sound appealing to you to develop your programming that way, I understand. And you may choose not to do this, but please understand that some other company will embrace it. They will use it. This is absolutely a part of your future. And there's a second part of big data, which is this question. What's your proprietary data asset? What is your proprietary data asset? The question was put to me by a very successful investor at Union Square Ventures in New York. You see, this company invests in companies like Tumblr, Twitter, SD, Foursquare. All of these internet services generate a proprietary data asset. That means the more people use them, the more data they collect. So I thought, well, why don't we compare the proprietary data asset of television with the proprietary data asset of a web service? So we do have a proprietary data asset in TV. It's a TV series. We invest in shows. And when we invest in shows, well, it's very expensive to invest in a TV series. And as a result, those TV series are scarce. But on the internet, we invest in technology, tools, and infrastructure to allow our users to generate a great deal of content. And as a result, the content itself is free and ever growing, and it's abundant. And this radically changes the economics of the business. You know, when you launch a TV show, you're not done spending when you produce the show. You have to continue spending to market the show and drive an audience. But most of the successful sites on the internet today, well, the audience does the marketing for you, and again, that's free. the security of our TV content is very weak. On a two-way network, it's actually a bad product. It's too easy to steal. The user data, on the other hand, on a web service, that lives on a server, and it's very difficult to steal that data. The value of your TV shows is quickly depleted, whereas internet services, the value of the content continues to grow. And finally, these enable entirely different revenue models. In television, we're in the licensing fee business, so we want to get paid up front. You want my show? Pay me a fee. On the internet, the business model is quite different. You build a platform, and you open it up to third-party developers, and you give them a programming interface, and you invite them into your ecosystem and say, here, go build a cool application on top of my data. Here's access to my data. That's what the API gives them. And it means that together we'll build an even better business, we'll generate even more data, and we'll share revenue from that success. As you can see, these are completely different ways of looking at data. And I advise you to begin to study this. If you're not familiar with it, you need to get familiar with it. Final note for programmers, you have to begin to think omni-channel. Too much of our television industry is focused on TV. So for instance, when I talk to the people that run cable channels, the first question they ask me is, how can mobile drive people back to television? Or how can the internet drive people back to television? I've got bad news for you. That's not why people are going to those new platforms. They're not going to those platforms in order to be driven anywhere. What they want is a great experience on those platforms, and so you have to think omni-channel. You'll begin to hear this phrase quite a lot now because this is emerging as a great big trend. Unbundling demands great courage. In a world where channels are going to disappear, we have to begin to develop a strategy for how do we program outside of a channel. That's a real fear that everybody has. Many people focused on Netflix with their recent launch of House of Cards. Here's a company that doesn't have channels, and they launched a TV series. This is kind of a bold move. But I think there's a better example in the Red Bull Stratos campaign. You remember this, right? Back in September, a daredevil from Austria named Felix Baumgartner decided to go up in a hot air balloon to the edge of the stratosphere and take the world's highest free fall jump. Quite an extraordinary adventure. Red Bull spent millions, 5 years of development, and they spent millions of dollars preparing for this. But one of the strange things about this event is it couldn't be on television because they couldn't schedule it. It was a bit like launching a rocket into space. They had to wait for the right weather conditions. They scratched the mission a couple times because the weather wasn't quite right. And one day Felix came out and he said, okay, the weather's right, we're going to go, get everything set up. And so they had just an hour to notify people. And the way they did this was a great example of omni-channel programming. They started out using Red Bull's vast social media campaign, their social media network. And they notified about 1 million people who were following Red Bull that the launch was about to take place. Those people all did, on average, 2 social media actions. Maybe they posted on Twitter and they posted on Facebook. And that content was seen by 90 million people collectively, which caused 8 million people to tune in to the live event. And ultimately, at the end of the event, they got 2 million more subscribers. So this was a tremendous social media win for Red Bull. Oh, and let's not forget that the program was called the Red Bull Stratos campaign, and they got picked up by every major news outlet in the world, so they also got that exposure for free. It was a textbook example of how to program in an omni-channel fashion. I think it's a brilliant example. So new media requires new attitudes. And the attitude that I want to speak to you most about is mobile. It's very important. I think we need to change our thinking about the mobile phone. 77% of the time, when your audience is at home watching television, they're using another device. In fact, we were just talking about this last night. The numbers might even be higher. This data is from Google, but there are several reports that suggest it might even be as high as 85% of the time that people are using 2 screens or more. They're multitasking. We need to pay attention to this. We look at our mobile phones about 150 times a day. This is becoming the center of our universe. Now, in 2000, I traveled around the world. I was the head of a company called Packet Video. I led the team that put video on cell phones. And at the time, my friends in the TV business thought I'd lost my mind. They couldn't get it. They said, TV belongs on a television, just like music belongs on a stereo. Remember, this was back in 2000. That wasn't an unreasonable position. And they said, why would anyone want to carry a television around anyway? It's sort of a cumbersome thing to do. But look at how much things have changed in just the past decade. Look at how much things have changed. Here's some information that you'll be maybe surprised to learn. Recently, when President Obama won his second presidency at the inaugural ball, he danced with his wife, Michelle. And as you can see in these photos, a lot of the people in the audience were excited about that. They took out their smartphones and they began shooting video. So this has become a habit. But here's what's even more astounding. It wasn't just the people in the front row. Everybody in the audience, everybody in the audience was shooting video. This is a gigantic transformation. You see, mobile media puts me in media. This is democratization on a gigantic scale. There are 3 billion people using mobile phones. 1 billion of them have smartphones. 500 million of them are shooting video. We're shooting video all the time. We use it to communicate with our families. We use it to record family events. We're streaming live video from rock concerts. We're using it when we go snowboarding or when we go diving or skydiving. We're shooting with those little GoPro cameras. People are now life blogging. They strap these little cameras around their necks like pendants that shoot random interval video for them. They can document their lives this way. U.S. servicemen are strapping cameras onto their helmets so that they can shoot video right from the front lines. You can find hundreds of these on YouTube. And if you search around on YouTube, you'll find video from the guys on the other side who are shooting back at them. Stuff that's unimaginable just 10 years ago now is commonplace. Video played a decisive role, mobile and video played a decisive role in the Arab Spring. That was how they communicated. Because remember, broadcasting in those countries was centrally controlled. Here it's decentralized, it's democratized, people can create their own news. And just recently, we saw a spectacular example of this just 2 weeks ago. In a remote region of Russia, several drivers recorded video of a meteorite shooting across the sky. This is a video you never could have captured in the past. You couldn't possibly have gotten the camera in the right spot just as the meteor was coming through. But now so many Russians are driving around with video on their dashboard that there are actually several videos on the internet now that show that meteorite coming through. So this is stuff that simply couldn't possibly have been captured. When television executives ask me what's going on with mobile video, I like to tell them that it's being vaporized. Vaporized. What do I mean? Well, you know ray guns, right, from a science fiction story. When you watch a sci-fi movie, you've seen someone shoot a ray gun at an object, and that object disintegrates or disappears in a puff of smoke. And that's what I mean. We're vaporizing a lot of things, but you don't need a ray gun to do it. You just need a smartphone. You see, in the last 10 years, there's been this incredible compression where more and more features are getting packed into a smartphone. So here is, in 2002, what was then a state-of-the-art smartphone. It was a RIM BlackBerry pager that included your mobile phone, your address book, your email, and your pager, right? So that's what made it a smartphone. It had those 4 functions. In just a 10-year span, we've collapsed the feature functionality of about 25 different consumer electronics devices, including video cameras, photo cameras, video playback, DVDs, game consoles. All of that has been compressed down into your smartphone today. It's truly a modern miracle that's in your pocket, that smartphone. It's incredibly capable. And of course, there are 1 billion apps that we can download to our phones as well. Each of those apps used to represent something that was a physical product that you had to buy. That's what I mean when I talk about vaporized. We're turning physical things into invisible software that can be downloaded. And this is a great thing. This is a great thing for consumers. It's a great thing for smartphone owners. It's a great business opportunity. You see, we vaporized the camera. You don't need it anymore. Everybody has a camera in their pocket. It's their smartphone. We're even vaporizing the TV set. The screen, that retina display, is actually quite good. Those portable screens have as much resolution as a high-definition TV in your living room. And in fact, many people watch video on their smartphones while they're in a room with a television on. So we seem to like these little screens. When people ask me, well, what about the television and the TV industry? I say, hey, look, the tablet's not a television. It's better than a television. It is. Look, the consumer has to make a decision. Should I buy another TV for my house, another flat screen, or can I buy a tablet? They cost about the same amount of money. But the tablet's a much better value because it includes a game console and a computer and a book, an e-book reader, an iPod, a video camera, and that's not all. You can also use it to compose and publish content as well. So your tablet is really a versatile multimedia device, and it offers a heck of a lot more value to consumers than buying another television set. No wonder the ownership of TVs is starting to decline in the United States for the first time ever. All of the future growth is going to be in mobile. Mark my words, all of the future growth is going to be in mobile. Now, I say that, and I know that Precision Transfer is going to show you later today some amazing new things that are happening with 4K, so don't miss that opportunity. Definitely go check that out. But today, I want to spend the remaining time talking about this mobile opportunity because it is so gigantic, you need to know about it. You see, I compared 2 different worlds. Let me do another comparison between physical media and vaporized media. Physical media is scarce and it's exclusive. Only one person at a time can use it. It's also quite expensive because you have to move around all those atoms. And it's slow to change. Vaporized media is quite different. If you look at the dynamics of mobile software, it's abundant, it's cheap, it's free sometimes. It's shared. It means millions of people can use it simultaneously. And it changes very, very quickly. Look at all the updates that are on your iPhone right now that you haven't downloaded. This stuff is changing constantly. So it's a very dynamic space. I'll give you a for instance. So how many people have heard of the companies here that are on the screen? Raise your hands if you're familiar with any of these. If you haven't, okay, so a few people, but not a lot of people. I'm telling you folks, you're in the TV industry, you need to download all of these apps to your iPhone or to your Android phone. You need to get familiar with it. These are the social video apps, and they're growing at an unbelievable rate. Here's a for instance. In April and May of last year, just in a 2-month span, 2 of these companies, SocialCam and Vidi, went from 0 users to 40 million users in 1 month. That's extraordinary at a time when broadcast television is struggling to find an audience in the United States of more than 10 million for any show. It's astonishing to me that 2 companies you never even heard of have built an audience of 40 million in just a few weeks. That's how fast it grows in mobile. And all of the momentum is over there in mobile. Mobile gives people the ability to manage media on their own terms. That's a radical decentralization. It's radical democratization of access to media. It's a sea change. You need to understand it if you wish to be successful in the future. A lot of people are speculating that Apple is going to launch a TV set, and they may have to do it because investors expect it at this point. But I don't think they really need to do so because Apple, with their Apple TV device, that little box on the bottom of the screen, and their tablet and their smartphone, they can actually bypass the cable TV infrastructure right now and allow you to download any type of content to your television or other device. You can share content from device to device, and they may even be able to beat Sony and PlayStation, Sony PlayStation and the Microsoft Xbox by introducing a game service that runs across all of these devices in the living room and thereby vaporize the game console as well. Whatever can be turned into vapor will be. I guarantee you that. Mark my words. Whatever can be turned into downloadable, invisible software, it will occur. Books have already been vaporized. E-books now outsell physical books. Music has already been vaporized and turned into a digital service. Maps have been vaporized. Airplane tickets have been vaporized, and they've been replaced by truly awesome travel apps that actually make travel much easier because they dynamically update. They tell you what's changed in your flight path and so forth. People think that the future of mobile is all about the smartphone. And it is true, the big battle between Samsung and Apple has captured a lot of investors' attention in the past year or 2. And we've seen this trend towards miniaturization over the last 20 years from really big phones. Remember the phone that Michael Douglas used in Wall Street in 1984? Yeah, it was like a shoebox, right? And we thought that was cool. It was like, wow, Michael Douglas has a cell phone, right? That was a cool thing back then. That's the phone on the far left. And now all the way over on the right, you've got a phone that's literally 100 times more powerful, and it's tiny, it runs forever. It's infinitely extensible with downloadable apps, but that's not the end of the road. That process is going to continue. That process of miniaturization and ever better power for ever less money, that process is going to continue, and you're going to start to see the phone itself is vaporized. It'll turn into glasses from Google, or new wristwatches like Pebble, and presumably Apple is going to introduce a wristwatch soon as well. Some people speculate that we'll soon have bendable technology, so flexible electronics that can be a kind of bracelet that you might wrap around your wrist. You'll carry your media with you as a kind of fashion accessory. And ultimately, Microsoft is working on making the phone disappear entirely so that it'll be pure light projected by a small pendant onto your hand, and they'll use gesture tracking to recognize the instructions, a voice command. So you can just say, bring up the phone, and it'll project it onto your hand, and then you can dial the phone in the palm of your hand, and they will turn the telephone into pure light, pure information. And so the phone itself is likely to be vaporized. Under these circumstances, is it any wonder that I believe that TV itself will be vaporized? And I don't mean vaporized like the television industry is going to go away. That's not my point. That's not what I'm trying to say. I just mean that the physical thing, the television itself, is probably going to get vaporized. And I think that's a great thing, because we can move away from the tyranny of that black rectangle hanging on the wall that causes us to have to sit in a certain spot in our house to watch television. And we can move into a really amazing world. Now, this is way out. This may be 10 years or more into the future. So don't take it that I'm offering this is coming next year or something. I don't think so. But in the future, I believe we're going to move into a world where video is everywhere, where we're awash in media, and touch screens or gesture control is everywhere, so that you'll walk into a hotel room, a conference room, a meeting room, an office, a school classroom, and the room itself will configure automatically to you. It'll recognize you when you come in. It might be the NFC chip in your phone or whatever device you carry at that time. It may recognize that, or maybe it'll be 3D cameras in the corner that recognize your face. And it will automatically reconfigure the room to your preference, and your media in the cloud will appear on those walls, and you'll control it, just like Tom Cruise did in Minority Report with gesture control, gesture tracking. So we'll all have that power. And this is coming very, very fast. The reason Microsoft chose the word Surface for their tablet was because they're not focused on tablets. They don't think it's going to stop with that form factor. Their new technology is called Surface because they see the idea for computing everywhere. And by the way, we're going to break out of the building as well. This isn't just going to happen indoors. If you haven't followed 3D projection mapping technology, definitely check this out. They're incredible videos. I should show you a video because the videos are amazing. I don't have time to do that today. But 3D projection mapping means that we can bring video into the world around us, and we've seen brilliant examples all over the world in the last couple of years of transforming a building into a video display. And that will soon come. I think that'll soon be ubiquitous. So those are my thoughts about inventing the future. I encourage you to stop fighting the future. Don't resist the future, but instead encourage everyone on your team to master the process of thinking like a disruptor, and then you too can join me in inventing the future. Thank you very, very much. It's a pleasure to be back here and see you again. Thank you.
Robert, thank you. Thank you. Well, thank you, Robert. For anybody that just didn't get the shit scared out of them, you obviously weren't listening. But did you notice the one common thread through all of that? And it goes back to what people have been saying is it's all video, right? It's all video. So it's still the opportunity is there, but you really have to stand things on their head and understand how people are consuming video.